Server connections can have a big impact on your website performance, especially when your visitors have a high latency connection. Let's find out why. This request waterfall shows all the requests that are made when loading this website and when content starts to appear for the user. New server connections need to be created every time you connect to a new domain name. After that, they can be reused. We can edit the columns and take a look at the connection ID. Here we can see that all of the requests to the web.dev domain use the same connection. After that, we create a connection to www.gstatic.com, and then once our connection is established, other resources can also be loaded over the same connection. Each connection takes some amount of time to establish and consists of 3 different components that each require at least one network round trip. First of all, there's a DNS lookup, which converts the website domain to an IP address. Then the TCP connection step creates a reliable connection. And finally, the SSL or TLS connection exchanges encryption keys and makes sure that the connection is secure so that other users on the network can't see your data. Overall, in this request waterfall, we can see that most of the time is spent on actually downloading the resources, but a good amount of time as well is spent on just creating the server connections. And if you can reuse server connections and load different resources that are needed to load your website, all from the same domain, that's going to improve your overall page load performance. How big the performance impact of server connection is depends a lot on the network latency of your visitors, and that in turn depends on their network connection and whether you are using a data center that's local to them or a global content delivery network with many different locations. Let's take a look at another website and the server connections that are needed to render page content. We start by connecting to readme.com. After that, there is another render blocking request which is loaded from kit.fontawesome.com, and then that in turn creates a new request to another fontawesome.com subdomain. If I click on this and switch to the request chain tab, I can just see this important render blocking request chain without all the other requests. You can see that right now, the request chain is completely sequential. So the second fontawesome subdomain connection isn't created until after the first fontawesome CSS request is complete. However, browsers support preconnect resource hints, which allow developers to tell the browser about connections that are going to be needed before the connection is actually required. So that allows us to basically shift the second connection forwards so that when it's needed, we can immediately jump to making the request rather than creating the connection. Debugbear actually has an experiment that kind of allows you to try that out automatically. So if I scroll down the page and I look at create required server connections proactively, it can tell me that this connection is needed, and I can click on run experiment and it's going to generate that preconnect hint for me. And then I can click on run experiment to see how fast the website is with the preconnect hint and without the preconnect hint. So I did that a bit earlier, and you can see that while we don't have a massive improvement in the overall largest contentful paint score, the page still loads about 700 milliseconds more quickly. If we look at the request waterfall now, we can see that the connection step for the CSS file has been moved forward, so it's independent of the actual request now. And then once the browser realizes that it needs to download this file, the connection has already been established, and it can immediately start downloading the resource. You can use our free website speed test to measure how server connections impact performance on your website.